Hi, you made it to my channel, Niche Gaming. Today we're going to talk about the GMC MH9500. This was a late 60s, early 70s heavy-duty truck, one of GMC's 9500 series of trucks, with the MH variation selected as the one used in SnowRunner. It was most frequently used for commercial logistics, but can be used in any way that a typical heavy-duty truck can. As a dump truck, snow plow, farming tractor, for logging, industrial logistics, vehicle transport, you name it. This was a highway truck and was advertised as such, but it also had off-road uses because it's a typical heavy-duty hauler. In SnowRunner, this truck is found in the first map of Michigan, in perfect condition, and already equipped with its best engine upgrade. The game gives you free upgrades in Michigan for its differential lock and race suspension. You can upgrade the tires to Offroad UOD II, and if you use my New Game Plus settings, you can upgrade the all-wheel drive right away, rather than having to scout the Kola Peninsula region to find it. Pretty much all of your highway commercial trucks have to be converted to heavy off-roaders, mudders, and snowrunners, and this one is no different. Keep in mind that while many heavy-duty trucks, like this one, did go off-road in real life, as there are not always paved roads on paths that trucks need to take, they were never meant for such uneven land, heavy mudding, or snow running that you find in SnowRunner's maps. So of course, they all have to be converted. See, the point is that why was this truck made into, or having the option, why was it put in the highway category? Well, really, it's a heavy-duty truck. It really is a heavy-duty truck. Why is it put in the highway category? Well, because SnowRunner felt like it. In real life, this is no different than the Fleet Star in terms of its actual practical usage. No different. Yeah, it has different specs and everything, which we'll talk about in a bit. But why was this put in the highway category and the Fleet Star put in the heavy-duty category? No good reason, except in the game, I guess they kind of justified because they put its all-wheel drive all the way in Kola Peninsula, which you won't get until you get to much later maps. And as I talked about in my New Game Plus settings video, where I decide which rules I'm going to play with, I make these upgrades available right away, because that's more realistic and it's better for the simulation. It sidesteps this silliness in this game, which they did, I guess. I would say it's more of a miscalculation. It does hurt the gameplay to do this, to just cripple trucks like this and not allow their all-wheel drive. Some trucks, can they simply not get all-wheel drive because of their configuration and design? Okay, that's fine. If it was not possible in real life, it's not possible in the game. Okay, that's fine. I can understand that. There are certain trucks like this in this game, but this one does get all-wheel drive. It's just much later, and that's silly. So that's, I think, the only justification for putting it in the highway category. Otherwise, this is a heavy-duty truck, and that's exactly what it was in real life. And the same thing with, as I mentioned before in my other review of the International TranStar 4070A, no good reason why that would be in any category except the heavy-duty truck category. That's exactly what it was in real life, but in this game, because they don't allow all-wheel drive and diff lock for that particular vehicle, I just put it in my pure highway category. So this is not a highway truck. This is a heavy-duty truck. It was both in real life and in this game. That's why I just sidestep all the silliness and I use my New Game Plus settings and access the all-wheel drive. I'm not going to separately scout Kola Peninsula just to find the all-wheel drive. It saves you some bucks, but hey, just get the all-wheel drive, buy it, save you a lot of trouble. Trying to go through different maps without any proper support with trucks is not a good idea. And then going to different, otherwise you might just scout all of the maps in SnowRunner, all the regions first. And again, that's not very practical. So that's why I just use my New Game. There are many reasons why, and I try to explain this in my New Game Plus settings rules video, why I set up the game that way. There's so many reasons, and this is one of the big reasons why. Let's talk about the dimensions and design of this truck. Length 8.7 meters, width 2.5 meters, weight 12,125 pounds. That's around about 6.1 tons. The body balance is average. Again, this is SnowRunner standards. As compared with the Fleet Star, this is more stable, better body balance, owing most likely to the wider frame. This body balance stability is the main reason this can be your, or should be, I think, early game workhorse and not the Fleet Star. So early in the game, depending on your, if you get unlimited money, so then it doesn't really matter. But if you use any typical normal New Game Plus settings, and you check my settings to see how much money I started with, you're not going to have money for like really good trucks and be able to upgrade all of them, and so you do have to find a way to use the trucks that you have early in the mission, and you get this truck for free. If you use this versus Fleet Star, well, why would you use this? I think it became my early game workhorse and not the Fleet Star because it was more stable. And as I mentioned, assuming you do get the all-wheel drive availability using the new Game Plus settings. Body balance is such a factor in this game because of the ridiculously uneven land. Body balance is not that much of a big factor in real life. So in real life, I'd probably favor the Fleet Star because it gets more power to weight ratio, has a slightly better engine, gets better fuel economy, all of that stuff. I would say the Fleet Star would be better, but because the body balance is a much bigger issue in this game, I would favor the GMC MH9500 as my early game workhorse. The drivetrain options include all-wheel drive and low gear diff lock. Again, assuming you use my new Game Plus settings. And it's your standard typical heavy duty stuff, 6x4, 6x6, rear tandem axle, and the diff lock is switchable in low gears. Now the diff lock is available in Michigan, and I believe you find it in Michigan, but the diff lock switchable in low gear just like all of the heavy duty trucks, and 6x4, 6x6 like pretty much all of the trucks, hauling trucks in this game. And in real life has a rear tandem axle 6x4. That's the drivetrain, and then you can get all-wheel drive if the truck allows it in real life, or if it allows it in this game. You can get the front-wheel drive as well, in addition. So all-wheel drive, front axle gets power as well, in addition to the rear tandem axle. Typically, all of them are all rear-wheel drive by default, by standard, and the rear tandem axle is where the power goes. As I mentioned before, the all-wheel drive upgrade can only be found in Kola Peninsula region, so the only way to use the all-wheel drive is, of course, to use this. And the new Game Plus settings, they make all the internal add-ons available from the start and not based on rank or finding an upgrade on some map. As with all trucks in SnowRunner, you don't need to concern yourself with the 16-speed transmission, as this game changes gears automatically, except when you need to use low gears or the high gears, and that's the main gear changing skill that you have to use in this game. As is typical with all of these heavy-duty trucks, use the off-road gearbox so that you can get the different low gear options and the one high gear option, both of which are used. High gear option helps you go up certain terrain. Usually I use high gear on paved terrain, or sometimes the terrain is not too, it's not so, the slope is not so high that you have to go into low gears, but it is slightly sloped. You are go uphill, and the high gear will help you. And the high gear can also help you when you're off-road. Usually though, if I'm going on even land or not going uphill, not going doing kind of uphill climb, I don't usually use high gear. I'll use normal automatic and let it go to whatever speed it'll get to. But high gear will also control and prevent automatic from making the truck go too fast, because it'll change gears on its own unless it's stopped or goes into mud or something that prevents its acceleration. So that's another advantage of high gear. The low gears, of course, are used in heavy mud, or heavy mud, or going uphill, or when the terrain is just dangerous. You can tip over if you're not careful. So low gears will really help you, along with diff lock, will help you go through that terrain. And especially with heavy mud, one thing you have to keep in mind, you really appreciate low plus, low regular, low minus when you're going through mud, heavy mud. Because when you go through the mud, sometimes if you try to go too fast, as you would in real life, you start getting wheel spin. The tires don't get enough time to get good traction on the mud, so they end up starting just wheel spin. So you want to slow them down. Sometimes you have to go from low plus down to low regular, and then from low regular down to low minus sometimes, just so you can get enough traction so your truck is just getting further and further stuck into the mud and getting wheel spin. So low minus does help you move through sometimes, and also it gives you ideal fuel consumption, fuel efficiency. So low plus would cost more fuel, low less, and low minus even less. You make slow progress, but at least you're making progress and you're not getting stuck. So that's very important to learn how to use off-road gearbox. So it's basic for SnowRunner off-roading. That's why you want to have that option, extra low gears, using the off-road gearbox. Off-road gearboxes can be found. They are found in pretty much every region. There's a couple of free upgrades, but you end up having more trucks that use off-road gearbox than you have free upgrades. So you're going to end up having to buy some for some trucks and use the upgrades for the other trucks. Off-roading tires are similar to the heavy-duty class, like all the heavy-duty classes. It's the same off-road set. Offroad UOD II is the version you need to pick. The whole UOD set is available for all of these typical heavy-duty trucks. UOD II will give you 0.8 in the asphalt, 3.0 in the off-road, and 1.9 in the mud. And the chained UOD III all chains will give you 1.2 on the asphalt, 3.0 in the off-road, and 1.3 in the mud. So significant difference between the all chain tires and the UOD II. So it's like a 0.6 difference, and that's quite significant in this game. These are map runner stats, of course, on the tires, on the performance of tires on different terrain. Off-road, you won't notice any difference between the chain tires and the UOD II, but when you go into the heavy mud, proper mudding, you'll notice a difference between UOD II and the all chains. The UOD II do significantly better in the mud, and the UOD III are required for icy regions in addition to giving you more control on roads. Now, this is a 47-inch off-road UOD tires. One of the biggest advantages that this has over the Fleet Star is that this is a 47-inch tires and those are 45-inch. And in all mudding or going through water, it's essential to understand that the larger the trucks and more the ground clearance, and ground clearance will be affected by tires and other factors as well, suspension, all that stuff. So raised suspension, larger tires always gives you better ground clearance, and that's why trucks will always do better, generally speaking, than your normal vehicles on like watery or muddy terrain. Always less chance of the water getting into the engine and into the suspension and the gears and everything else, preventing gear changing or other issues. Obviously the snorkel helps out here as well, so it doesn't get into the engine, and so you get a proper vent system with the snorkel. But higher ground clearance and larger tires will always help you do much better in mud and watery regions, both in preventing the vehicle from getting stuck or stopping up because the water got into the important parts or mechanical parts of the mechanical or electronic parts of the vehicle. That's of course in real life and in this game. So this will perform better in the mud than the Fleet Star would, because the Fleet Star had 45-inch tires. Larger the tires, the better it's going to do in the mud. Now, I want to mention that I made the mistake, and I initially didn't know about the map runner stats, so as I did with pretty much all my hauling trucks in the Michigan playthrough, I got chain tires because I didn't know about the map runner stats. So make sure to go with the right set, the UOD II. They do significantly better in the mud, and you don't need them for Michigan because there's no really icy region that you like. When you drive on ice, then you'll need the chain tires just so you can get good grip, especially if you're going up the ice. It's pretty reasonable steering and control for a heavy-duty class truck. It's the same, pretty much. The only difference between this and the Fleet Star is this will give you medium turning radius, whereas I classify the Fleet Star as a short to medium turning radius. So the Fleet Star would give you more sharp turns, whereas this one gives you... So it's a slight difference, not a huge difference. But in terms of control, they're both basically the same. Both average control. They don't lose control on high speeds or higher speeds. Less likely to lose control. You can lose control with any truck, especially going, let's say, on paved roads and you're using mud tires. You're going to get less traction, more likely to slip and lose control, and tires lose traction, and you get jackknife accidents and all that kind of stuff. That's all more possible if you're going really fast, which you shouldn't be, especially with the load. But it is important to note that they don't lose control very easily on any roads, especially when you're trying to go fast. They can still maintain decent amount of control. And the steering, of course, as I mentioned, medium turning radius, not bad, but not as good as the Fleet Star, which will allow you to make more sharp turns. One big downside is for this truck is the fuel consumption. The fuel consumption is high for its class. The fuel tank is not bigger than the Fleet Star. It's only 240 liters, just like the Fleet Star. But unfortunately, this consumption tops out at a level 20.2 liters per minute. That's with the off-road gearbox, all-wheel drive, diff lock on, under heavy load, on off-road terrain, the same basic conditions that you put the Fleet Star or other trucks in. This one will just end up using more fuel per minute and has the same fuel tank in the game. In real life, we even would have the same fuel tank as well, the side fuel tanks The left and right one, they're all steel fuel tanks, whatever amount of gallons. They'll have different variations of what's available, but you can't upgrade fuel tanks in this game. You only have fuel add-ons, and sometimes the external add-on will take up the space of hauling area, and this is not a fuel tank truck. And they didn't use it for that. They always use it for hauling. Like I said, there are good advantages, the biggest one being body balance, but also 47-inch tires and other reasons why I chose this as my main workhorse early on, even though the consumption was high. Now, of course, consumption does depend on damage status, terrain, gearbox, and load carried on rear tandem axle versus haul trailers, or in addition to haul trailers. And the spikes can go over the stable reading, but I always focus on the stable reading. And when you're typically moving under heavy load and everything, you're not going to be able to get to the fourth gear of the off-road gearbox. You probably end up getting to second or third gear. And this is what it's going to top out at, 20.2 liters per minute. The engine is going to be your typical heavy-duty power. The real-life engine is a Detroit diesel 8V-71N 65mm stroke V8 9.3 liter displacement, 289 horsepower at 2100 RPM, a 758 pound-foot torque at 1600 RPM, with a max gross combination weight of 76,800 pounds. That's a little more than 38 tons. That's slightly underpowered compared to the Fleet Star. So the Fleet Star does have a slightly better engine in real life and also in the game. The game engine in this one for the GMC MH9500 is a Westline V6 2420. And the map runner stats say this is a 7,000 mass and an 150,000 torque. And if you compare that with the Fleet Star was 155,000 torque. So Fleet Star does have a better engine, slightly though. It's not a big deal, it's not a huge difference, but that just goes also more to the fuel efficiency factor. Why does the Fleet Star have a top out at a level 17.8 or something liters per minute, whereas this one tops out at 20.2, even though it has a slightly more powered engine? It even has more horsepower, more torque, and yet it costs less in terms of fuel efficiency. And one of the big reasons is its own weight. That does matter, but even under heavy load and all that stuff. So this obviously has less power to weight ratio than the Fleet Star. A slightly underpowered engine, but you don't notice it on most of the tasks that need to get done. And there, in those cases, it's not just about raw power, it's also about body balance and stability because of the ridiculously uneven land that you're going to go through to try to, and also you're using your crane and everything, so body balance becomes much bigger factor than just raw power. But when you compare raw power, engine power, then yes, Fleet Star will do a little bit better than this, both in real life and the game engine. Available for this truck are the typical heavy-duty external add-ons. So that's another sign that they really meant this to be a heavy-duty truck, but for some silly reason, they put it in the highway category and hit its all-wheel drive in Kola Peninsula. I just don't get it. But anyway, this truck, typical heavy-duty external add-ons, gives you a large variety of options, gives you flexibility and versatility, and it makes this truck very dynamic, usable for many contracts, tasks, and contests. You can do a lot of stuff with it, and because of its early availability, because it was free, and because I allowed the all-wheel drive because of the New Game Plus settings, this was my early workhorse. So many reasons. As I mentioned before, while it's a highway class truck in SnowRunner, the typical heavy-duty external add-ons are available. It has the external add-on plus trailer plus LC loading crane 3.8, a combination. So you can have the loading crane, you can have your sideboard trailer plus an attached trailer like another sideboard. That attached trailer could be a 2-slot one or a 4-slot one. So you can actually take 6 slots. And I did that in one of my trucks, but I didn't take it uphill. I did 6 slots of like 3 metal beams or 6 service spare parts or something like that. A fully loaded 6 slots will be tough for this truck to take uphill, but it can take 6 slots or 6 slots of material fully loaded, 2 on its own sideboard bed or flat bed, and 4 on the trailer that is hauling. It can take that, but probably on even land. When I first did that in the early first map of Michigan, I think it was for the Fallen Power line. I was doing like 2 or 3 tasks at a time, so I just grabbed a fully loaded metal beam plus like 4 concrete blocks, so full 6 slots of cargo. But trying to take that uphill, you might not be able to. Sometimes the engine will just give out and won't be able to take it up. and you may need a more powerful truck, but it can take up to 6 slots. So it has that full combo. External add-on, whatever your sideboard bed or flat bed, plus the trailer, which could be a 2-slot or 4-slot or 3-slot or whatever you have available, plus the loading crane. And it can handle it. It certainly has that option. There are other trucks that don't, because of their configuration before their setup. They just can't connect all 3 at the same time. It does have, as I mentioned, high fuel consumption when it's compared to others in its class. But when you look at its large tires for its class, when you look at a decent body balance and versatility, and it's free, it becomes an excellent early game truck. And it's served as my workhorse, as I mentioned. A very, very important truck. There's so many tasks in this game where body balance becomes like the biggest issue when you go off-road. To do certain tasks, I mean, you could try to use some of your medium-duty trucks, or even in certain cases, scouting trucks or off-roading trucks to help you with those tasks, so you don't have to take your big hauling trucks to those ridiculous uneven land. But I would say that a truck that can handle that would be better. There was one task called, which I'll show in my other video, but one task called materials. No, what was it? Missing machinery, I think. Missing machinery was the name of the task. And I do in my other video, you can watch that. And in that video, you can see how careful I had to be. And of course, I've done that task so many times, I know exactly how you fall with it. With the Fleet Star, I felt like every time. I kept on tipping, I couldn't even complete it. But with the GMC MH9500, as long as you're super careful and you know about the uneven, you go nice and slow and you know exactly what angles to take, yeah, you can get through it. But it's a tough task because it's so easy to tip over. And then there are many uneven parts of the land where you can easily tip over. So body balance is very, very important. It matters. And that's why I had to use this as my workhorse and not the Fleet Star, even though Fleet Star had many advantages over it. Very, very good truck. Very good truck for the early game. Definitely don't sell it. That would be really silly to sell it. My verdict, of course, keep it. You may decide to use it for other reasons, but depending on your typical playthrough, right? If you're doing a typical Michigan playthrough and if you use the New Game Plus settings and make all-wheel drive available, this can easily be your workhorse. If you're playing on hard settings or normal settings where you have to go to Kola Peninsula to get this, then you're basically handicapped and you'll probably end up having to use a Fleet Star for most of your tasks and keep this on the paved land or light off-roading and just never let it go into the heavy off-roading. So you have to use it more like a highway truck if that's the way you're going to play it. I just think that's incredibly silly, and I hate that way to play, and that's no way to play a SnowRunner, in my opinion. So definitely a truck that you should use as your workhorse in Michigan if you use my New Game Plus settings, which you should. So that's it for my review for the GMC MH9500. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you liked it. Hope you liked these reviews, because I do my best to try to look at the real life stats and learn a little bit about trucks and physics and how it works in real life and how this truck works in the game. And obviously give you gaming advice on how to play in the game and use the truck properly. So hope you like my reviews. If you like it, give it a like, share, subscribe. Thanks for watching.